So one day I was walking on the elevated walkway near a silk station in Bangkok, and there was a foreigner, and he with a Thai woman, and they were talking, and it was a huge breakthrough for me because I had, live in your life, you just hear conversations of people, couples, right? And I watch people, right? So I watch couples, I don't know if you guys watched my old Valentine's Day one, but, that's a good day to go and watch couples, because if you want to see what your life's going to be like, if you'd make a certain decision, all you got to do is go watch people who made that decision, and you will learn a lot, right? Whether it's getting a PhD, becoming a doctor, getting married, whatever, you can see. You get an insight. I think a lot of guys, they don't like to see reality. They like to think, like, fundamentally, I have nothing in common with any other human being who ever lived. So if I make a decision, it's going to be completely different than anybody else in history, right? I really think a lot of guys think that way. They're like, I'm not going to watch other people because that just wastes time. But I totally disagree. I think when you watch other people, you really see sometimes even better than yourself because you're not attached to it, right? So I think watching other people is a great experience. So anyway, this guy's like talking, and the discussion was, obviously hampered by lack of English on the Thai girl side. But anyway, it's basically, I'm going to call this topic, Me No Say, right? Me No Say. So the guy is, now you can when you hear this, you're going to be like, that guy's an idiot or whatever. You can say what you want. But I would say, if you want to learn, don't pass judgment so quickly. Like, wait, watch, right? Watch. So this guy's like, she's saying something, right? I couldn't really hear what she said at first. And then he's like, me no say. And then, like, later on, he says it again, like, me no say, right? Now, I was looking at this guy. This guy, he looked educated, right? He looked smart. He looked like, if I was going to guess, this guy had a master's degree, right? And if just make a wild guess, I'm going to say chemistry, this guy. And he's talking like he's an absolute retard, right? And I was like, and then the girl's like, you say. He's like, me no say. And then she, there was this huge argument about, obviously, he had said something to some other girl, and this girl didn't like it, and they were having this argument, and I realized it was like deja vu. I realized this wasn't just one argument I was listening to. I was listening to hundreds of thousands of similar arguments I've heard here in Asia, where they were arguing about the same thing and kind of in the same, like basically the same level of English and communication and understanding. And when I was new in Thailand, I thought, or Asia in general, I thought that it was just that guy, right? And then I there's something came over me, and I realized, fuck, I've heard this a goddamn lot, right? I've heard a lot of guys, and then I realized it wasn't just a discussion. Like, I looked closely, and we were walking along for a while together, and I realized these guys were probably married. This wasn't some short time thing. This was probably marriage or long-term relationship. And it just struck me that it was so sad to see a man who obviously dressed well, his parents taught him how to brush his teeth, he studied hard, he just looked like he did a lot of the right things. You know what I mean? This guy, very straight type of character. And then I see where, like your relationship or whoever you're with is basically I mean, at the end of the day, what percentage of your life is it, right? Any of you guys who are married, like what percentage of your life was communication with your wife? You know, either phone, text, in person, in the morning, in bed, or even talking about her. You know, someone asked, what did Julie say? Oh, Julie said this. And, you know, oh, that's right, Julie told me to get, you know, it's almost like your whole life gets taken over, you know, when you're married, right, by this person. And I think a lot of guys, you know, they don't really realize what they're getting into. And I don't mean this is kind of like, you know, it's not like a put down to anybody. It's like more like it's a clash of cultures. And I don't mean Thai culture. I mean, it's a clash of, it's kind of, it can be, you know, in this case, it's Thai girl, but it doesn't have to be. It could be any country, right? And Eastern Europe, right? You're talking about a clash of a person who was really educated in the Western ways, you know, science, mathematics. And then you know, I've known a lot of these guys, and I'm going to go out on a limb and say this guy had a good understanding of the world. Like he could use his words like a sword. You know, he's an intelligent man who worked hard. And yet his life has been reduced to me no say, you know. And that's what he does. He's like, me no say, that this is it. Like, he's like with her, and either she's going to be lecturing him on how, you know, if you drink, you know, cold water, it causes bad luck. And, you know, if you, you know, eat this fish from a polluted river, you know, like I'm when I say polluted river, I mean like a river that you probably, if you haven't been to the third world, you probably don't know what I'm talking about. I mean a river, we called it Poo River, right, in Cambodia, but it's like when you think, there's nothing like this in the West. Maybe there was. No, I don't think there was in the 1900s. I think we're talking about, there's a level of pollution that exists in Asia, that, and probably in South America too, that is unthinkable to Western people. Like literally unthinkable. Like people just pour stuff in there. Like it could be oil, it could be bleach, it could be runoff from the restaurant. Of course, tons of human poo. Let's see, what else? What else would be in there in Poo River? I would say solvents, you know, lots of like mercury, arsenic, like every possible, like basically when you're dealing with like, you know, completely uneducated people. And I think a lot of guys that travel, they don't really understand what education means. And they think, I mean, a lot of guys, even on this channel, if you don't think about it, you probably think, oh, I could have done it myself. I didn't need education. You know, I would have figured it out on the internet. You know, I really didn't need a classical, you know, education to get where I'm at. But one of the things that you see when you travel really in destitute or third world places is that you see, I mean, what I see, what I think a lot of people like, the kind of shared wisdom of long-term expats, is you realize that you often don't know what shaped you. You don't really realize, you don't really have gratitude for the things you were given, because they, you know, at some point you just kind of take them for yourself. Like that was what I did. But I believe, and I can see clearly, that you are a product of your background. You know, you really truly gained from certain ways of thinking, ways of acting. You know, like I'm always eternally grateful. You know, because I see this from the outside. This is a very heavy episode. Like for example, for myself, I didn't really think about it, but my mom was a nurse, right? And she was a good nurse too. She was a nurse that, like a lot of nurses, they work for a long time, and they often know even more than a new doctor, right? Like they already know like that this disease is going around. You don't need to do a lot of testing. They can see things. They know trends. They know people very well. And, sometimes the young doctors, they really don't. They've trained in very specific. It takes time, right? Clinical, like it takes time to really be a great doctor, right? It's not something you just learn in school and go do it. Like there's so many pieces of the puzzle, right? And sometimes some nurses have been working so long, so hard that they really become very intuitive and, really experts at human nature and also seeing through lies, because part of being a good doctor is like realizing the person's not telling you the truth because they're embarrassed about stuff, right? So you have to kind of like, you have to have very good people skills to even get the information, right? But anyway, I was lucky because my mom was a good nurse. And so whenever anything came up in the family, because we didn't have cash, right? But she would usually know, like, this is serious, this is not serious. And she would be like, okay, we need to do this. You need to get this kind of, what is it called? Like preventative thing done. You need to, this is important. You can't let this one slide, And, one thing from my mom is I had very messed up teeth growing up. Like really, my teeth were just like jagged, And because I sucked my thumb as a kid, that you get that kind of hole in the middle where your middle teeth are, And so my teeth, not only were they just a mess naturally, but also I, didn't know obviously about that. And so my mom was like, we need to get you braces. And so even though they couldn't afford it, they like took me to the orthodontist, and I got braces, and my teeth were so bad, even though we actually had a great orthodontist in our town, just by total luck. It was a new orthodontics were like, it was like a new field basically when I was a kid. Like people were like, oh yeah, that's important. As education rises, people value different things, and people started to value teeth in Southern California when we moved there in 1974. And like, it was like, yeah, that's important because the way you chew actually affects your digestive system, which affects, a lot of things, right? Because the first step in digestion, right, is chewing. And if your teeth are all messed up, you don't properly chew, even though it looks like you do. It's all connected, right? Teeth are very important. And also, too, having nice teeth affects people's first impression of you a lot because you can't control people's first impression, right? You want to have a decent first impression. And so my mom knew it was important. And also, too, as you get older, any kind of teeth problems you have, they just get worse and worse and worse. And eventually, you don't get nutrients is what happens. And you have bone problems and all kinds of problems because you're not digesting. That first step in digestion, very important step, is breaking it down. Otherwise, you have to use a lot of acid in your stomach, and that causes extra problems. It takes longer. And there's just, it's very important that you properly chew, right? And that requires teeth, right? So, a lot of my friends, that didn't have such a great mom, they I had a friend in his 70s, and like his teeth were basically just falling out. And he had no idea, that was important. And, one of my friends that I hang out with a lot, he had serious teeth problems. And his parents didn't know about teeth. And so I met him in China. We've been hanging out ever since. And his teeth were just a fucking mess. And I couldn't believe it because he was so smart and everything, in every way. But he just didn't know about teeth right. And so I said, dude, you got to fix your teeth. Like, your mouth is a mess. He was young. I met him when he was 21. And I said, your mouth is a mess. And he's like, yeah, he just blew me off for like about more than that. Let's see. How many years was it? I don't remember exactly. Over 10 over 10 years. He just didn't listen. He just didn't. And finally, we're good friends and he listens to me. And finally, one day he just came to me and said, like, my teeth, like, they're a mess, and it's affecting my life. And I said, well, look, how much will it cost? So I went and figured out what it will cost to do everything required. And it was way too much money, like way, way too much money. And so I told him, I said, hey, I'm always thinking out of the box. I said, you can't afford it. There's no way. Even in Cambodia, you can't afford that. So I said, you need to get a girlfriend who's a top-notch dentist, basically. And he's good, he's smart, and he went and got one. He got a top-notch dentist here in Thailand, and she fixed all his teeth. It took, I think it took about a year to do everything. It was like huge amount of work, like a lot of work when it's really like, you're rebuilding, basically like Pacific Palisades after the fire kind of thing, right? It's a lot of work, right? You got to clear out all the crap. You got to make smart decisions because they can't be changed, right? You got to set the foundation for teeth, and there's a lot of stuff to be done, right? And so anyway, he did it, and he got a new mouth for free, right? And it was a mouth he would have never had. Now he's got the money, but now he's kind of too old to get all the work he got done. So it was kind of like a perfect like window of opportunity. And, that's the way sometimes you got to solve problems in life. You got to figure out a way to get shit done. You know what I mean? You can't just give up, kind of like I talked about in my last episode. But so I was lucky because our family, like we just knew when something was serious because Mom would know. She'd just be like, yeah, got to go to the hospital, which is very rare, but, got to go now. And, I was very great. As I get older, I'm very, very grateful for my mom's medical training and also her experience, because not only did it help me as a kid and it helped me as an adult, and I think it had a great impression on what do you call it? Not impression. It was like, I think like even like living in Japan and Tokyo and stuff, and working and headhunting and everything. I think that the first impressions I got from people due to the fact that my mom got my teeth fixed. I needed braces twice, by the way, so I had braces for many years to finally get my teeth all right. And the thing is that I think I don't know. There's no way I could have done what I did in Japan if my teeth looked like the way I was, like trailer park. Like if I would have looked like that, there's no way I would have gotten the access and had the experience and the TV and the movies and all the experience, like public speaking and business. And because people just think you're dumb. Like if you look dumb, that's it. That's your first impression of people, like, right? If you just look stupid, right? You don't want to look stupid. It's really important. It's fucking important. You do not want to look stupid because it'll limit you, even though you won't be able to see the limit in your life, right? You just got to know people are people. Fuck it. I'm going to make the smartest decisions so that I have the best chance, right? And that's another reason why I think staying in shape is so important, is because the impression is that you have control of your life and that you're educated and you have discipline. Now, it might not be true. You might just pure luck, you might be one of the rare guys, but usually there is truth to it, right? So people are looking at you, they're judging you, and that judgment, people just have 8 seconds to decide who you are before they move on. There's like 5-6 billion people in the world, something like that. They just don't have time, you know what I mean, to really think deeply about who you are. If you're smart, you got to put a good first impression. That's it. If you want to get those limited opportunities, like, this weekend, when I met that guy, the crane operator, right? I met this guy that we ended up helping. Basically, I'll just tell you, basically helping Joel might be a new career, right? And I just met him. good impression. He was kind of blowing me off. He was kind of being a dick. I asked a few questions, got past that, ended up having a great discussion. That led to an introduction, which might lead to a whole new career, right? And I guess people don't really realize if you really want to kick ass in life, you got to take advantage of all those like serendipitous type of things. Like you can't just get the ones that are handed to you by your uncle is you know what I mean? Like he works at Microsoft, he's going to help you get in. Like you need all those little things. Like where they've studied studied successful people's lives. And most of the things in successful people's lives that really made a difference were those random meetings. They were a result of a random meeting, like a meeting at a bus stop, meeting at a convention, meeting through a friend's girlfriend, and just a short party or something, and then a connection, an introduction, an idea. And those things are the things that led, because basically what the study was saying is that you've already taken advantage of everything in your close circle, right? There's nothing else they have to give you. All of your good luck, all of your opportunities are going to come from those snippets, those quick interactions, right? And that's related to, how people see you, right? Whether it's your people skills or whatever. So anyway, so that's another really reason not to go the me no say route. Because if you have somebody that you've chosen as your partner, which starts from a good fuck, right? And then you get locked in over time. If you have somebody that is, in many circles, let's just say, embarrassing or not up to it, right? You can't take them everywhere, Like I've said it before, but I highly value a girl that I can take places. If I do have a girl, I prefer a girl I can take places. She can roll with me, right? Same with my friends. The friends that get full access, they're the ones who have, they're the ones who not only have talent, but they also have discipline and they also have respect and all that, right? So otherwise I can't take them places because it's just going to fuck things up, right? It's not going to work, right? So not only does this stuff affect those chance opportunities, but it also affects people who are always looking at you like, is this guy up for taking him to this party? Can I take this guy to a university meeting, blah, 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 whatever the fuck it is, right? Or is he going to embarrass himself and myself and not add anything, take away? You know what I mean? Like you're only going to take somebody who's going to take away from your life who's your kid. Your kid, you're going to make any sacrifice you need to make for a kid. You don't give a shit. He ruins friendships, jobs, you're just going to support the kid no matter what. But friends and relationships, you might say you're going to do it, but you really won't, because at the end of the day, you got to, it's hard to succeed, right? It's fucking hard. You can't have somebody coming in and fucking things up. Whether it's by their, I just used the word fuck a bunch of times, but their ability to control their vocabulary, their actions. There's so many things, right? Like this journey that we're on of improving ourselves, basically to be unblackmailable, this whole thing, it has tentacles into everything that you'll eventually say luck. Oh, he's lucky, right? Was he lucky, right? Was it luck? Or was it just something you don't understand? And so you're just pulling a thing out of your ass saying, oh, luck, right? So the me no say problem is that when you come to a third world especially if you're an open-minded guy like me, I was you don't need education. I learned myself, you can study on your own. Obviously you can, right? You can learn a lot of stuff on your own. Once you have the foundation of an understanding of life, right? But I think a lot of guys don't understand that you need that foundation. And that's why I'm very grateful. I was, born in the U.S. and I got a foundation of the Western what do you call it? Like a view of the world, right? The West, like a lot, it's not popular right now, but it's true anyway, is that the West really pulled a lot of the world out of misery and poverty and disease. And there was something in the culture. There was something there that, I think it was like I think it was like the kind of the concept of science, really. It wasn't called science, but it was that sense that I'm not going to believe my gut. I'm going to do a test, and I value honesty. I'm not going to lie. Like, I value that as a personal trait, and I'm going to do a test, and I'm going to see what happens. And then if somebody else can't reproduce that, then it's probably not true, right? I'm not going to say that I just believe something, right? Like, have faith. Religions are always telling you have faith, right? I think Western tradition, Western culture was like, no, fuck faith. Like, no, check it out, test it out, see if it works. Have somebody else test it, right? Somebody else who might not have your internal biases, right? And let's find the truth. Let's find basic principles of the universe, of matter, of anything, and let's get a truth, or some temporary truth that leads to another truth that leads down the road, down the alley to another truth, right? And how truths kind of a bunch of truths together mixing in a brew kind of lead to more truth. It's kind of like a bunch of guys that are pretty funny can just get together, and next thing you know, they got a show like South Park, right? It's like there's this magic, basically. That's the best word I have for it. Speaking of science, right? But there's like a magic that happens when a bunch of people have all, done whatever it takes, or have the skills or the genius or whatever of whatever that thing is, right? Whether it's humor or whatever. And then they get together and they have this thing where they're challenging each other. Every word they say is challenging the other guy, because the funny guy, the guy who's funny, naturally funny, he hears the other guy's joke and he's like, that's hilarious. And then he thinks inside himself and he's like, this is not a regular conversation. Like, I'm going to dig deep here. Let my tentacles of my brain, when you're focusing on something, right? You're looking ahead, driving, and then all of a sudden you start to use your peripheral vision and see more, where you can almost see sideways, right? Plus you can see ahead. And like you're maximizing the subtleties, the ancillary skills that you have, and you're like, wait, this is an opportunity. Especially a guy, like a funny person. They're like, boom, I'm in the presence of a hilarious genius. Like, I'm also going to go there. Because if you're really funny, like, you don't even go there, because if people just say, shut up, or you're always telling, if they don't appreciate it, then the guy just doesn't really get any benefit from being funny, right? But if he realizes, like Mozart or whatever is with another person playing the piano, he hears and he's like, oh, I must also reach in deep in myself and find, whoa, that's possible. And he's not embarrassed, like, whoa. And then the other person is just inspired to reach in themselves, whether it's humor or whatever. And I think that's kind of like what happened, is it started with this acceptance and then the ideas got together. There's a book actually called When Ideas Have Sex. And I thought it was the most fascinating book. I just remembered that. Yeah. When Ideas Have Sex. And the guy really proved to me something I already kind of knew. That's what good education is. You kind of sense something, right? But it's not quite filled in yet. You need somebody to kind of help you to see different sides of it, like an elephant, right? The blind man touching the different part. Now you understand what an elephant is, right? You have a basic understanding, but you want more, right? And that comes from other people, right? So anyway, when you travel, okay, And, like, for example, like relationships, right? Bone-in chicks, right? You get out there and you see, for example, back home, the girls are, really, it's really sad. Like in the West, like the level, the quality of female partners is so, I'm not saying it's hopeless. Like I think in another like 50 years, I think that we'll see a resurgence, of the West, of femininity. I think that everything ebbs and flows. And it goes as long as it gets paid, right? As long as it's paid off, then people keep doing it. But if it doesn't pay off, humans adapt, right? And I think that's what's going to happen. I think we're going to see, I kind of think we've already kind of started to see the glimmer of it, like with anime and Japanese culture, that whenever you see anything kawaii or whatever, all that came from Japan. It's in all of Asia, but it was all from Japan. Like there's been little subtle improvements, but basically it was like the Japanese culture had an understanding of what is truly attractive in a female to a man, right? I think the Japanese really truly had the best understanding. You got to say best sometimes with cultures. I really do. I believe. I'm not saying when you go there you're going to see it every day, and I'm just saying, like, looking over time, I think the Japanese, and I think that has now totally gone to Korea with K-pop, right? And then you see, like, I know tons of guys, like especially Ronin guys, who they don't even listen to Western female singers, really. They just don't even. They're just like all about city pop and K-pop and a few J-pop, and also that translates to Instagram and movies. We're seeing a generation of men who just basically, and it's destroying Hollywood. I don't think people understand that. Like youth, right? And kawaii and cute and chastity and all that. And subtlety. That stuff is so powerful that it will shift, trillions over time, trillions of dollars, because cultures that don't understand that, they're not getting the heart of the man who hands his money over, right? Unless they change, which I think they will eventually, but they'll realize, like, this isn't working right. Like, whatever it is that we had, whatever we were doing, this is a dead end road, And look at this. Now we got, Asia taking over entertainment. Asian actors, and with that comes massive power. Like the power that Hollywood had back in the day was incredible. Win wars, it was incredible. If you look at the power of, Chinese call it soft power. That's what they were jealous. The CCP was envious of the West for a word that they invented, which is a great word, actually, soft power. It wasn't hard power, like forcing people. It was just like an attraction that drew you to it. And you know what that was? It was so powerful, it drew a man overseas, like the idea of freedom and opportunity. And then he brought his family, right? Or he brought himself and he made a family. And that brings in insane money and insane value. And now we're seeing, like, kind of the end of the road on that, because of a lot of changes that happen in the West, is that, people kind of arrive in the West and they're kind of like, what was it that I came here for? Like, what is better here? And a lot of the things that were better were kind of destroyed, right? So I think right now we're seeing a lot of, like, Indian men and Chinese men who kind of regret having made the pilgrimage to America, to the West. I'm just using America for the West right now, because it's the biggest country. It's huge, right? Tons of people, right, go there. And Canada, same thing. So what happened, I think, now is they're regretting it. And then I believe that they're going to tell people back home, like, hey, there's not what used to be here is not here anymore, And I think we're seeing it like this huge cultural shift. And with that comes an enormous power if the West doesn't get their shit together. I do have hope that it will. I have hope that it will. I'm not saying it's like hopeless for the West, but I can tell you that this is a very perilous time for a lot of people's futures. Very heavy things are being decided at this moment. Massive changes going on in our lives. People will go back and read this about this period of time as just being the most fundamentally, structurally huge, monumentous periods where really things all shifted out. I think a lot of it is because of social movements, but it's also because of the internet, where the internet was the greatest invention of all time. There's no question. Books, the Gutenberg printing press and all that was important, but nothing like the internet. Nothing like the internet. And cell phones. So the Mino say, right? When you travel, it's a balance for people. Like you want to, like in the end of the day, when it comes to sex, men just want, for me, and Drinking Dave said it the best. He said basically box to rack ratio. That is a powerful thing. Like a tiny box, right? And a nice, balanced ratio, nice rack there. That's the most attractive thing to a man, right? And so you see that here. We're gonna do a Cambodia summit coming up in probably May, probably early May is kind of guess, but in May. And if you can make it, you definitely should make it because there's a lot going on right now. There's some changes happening. This is going to be a very good summit. Very worth the price to come to fly. You pay, flights are getting cheaper, and anyway. So I think Cambodia. I think it's one of the last. It's one of the last places of what we're going to talk about at the summit. Like, there's some real hot chick femininity that's available. Like, really hot. Like, I will say this, and I'm not exaggerating. It might be and my friend said this actually, the greatest arbitrage for men of all time. Like the greatest arbitrage where you're trading like what's available in one place. It's like back in the day, people used to buy Bitcoin in Japan and sell in Korea. There was an arbitrage. This is the beginning, like back in the like 2010. There was a great opportunity because they didn't have set pricing. Bitcoin didn't have a price. You could sell it on the exchange. You could make money just buying and selling, buying and selling, buying and selling. And people were doing it like crazy. And the different exchanges had different price. It was crazy. Like people made a lot of money on that arbitrage. And I can't remember exactly how it worked because it was obviously on the blockchain. Anyway, there was an arbitrage. My friends made tons of money. So with Bitcoin. And so the arbitrage is you buy in one place, you sell in another. There's a different price for the same thing. And the price of a woman with, let's say, 1.25 inch, very tight, wet, young box that's just milky, you know what I mean? Just like a fucking glove, right? And a rack with like eraser nipples. Like the price of that in LA has become just astronomical. Like for a sweetie pie too, like a virgin or close or whatever, like a real fucking, like just fucking angel as far as I'm concerned. That price has just gotten insane. So a lot of guys don't have the vision of history that I do from being here almost, getting on 4 decades, right? Is that these things disappear quick. Like there's countries that open up and then it's just kind of there and gone. Like it's like, even when I move there, it's like it just disappears, evaporates in front of my eyes. Girls adjust, they get on all, like everything changes, right? And then it's gone forever. That's what I think a lot of young guys can't realize, is that everything you see is just going to be gone. All your friends, they're going to die. Like everything that's like a great trend, like punk rock, it just dies. And you think, well, it'll never die. Punk rock is great, but the energy just kind of is there for anything that's, yeah. And, like the food in Japan during the bubble, you had these people who were raised in poverty from the war, and they were so hardworking, they would work their fingers into arthritis over just peeling radishes. Like, you had these just absolutely insanely hardworking people that were so disciplined. And then you had this influx of money. And these people were working at restaurants, and they were making dishes that were so phenomenal, because it requires human labor. It requires intelligence. Enormous. I mean, I'm not saying it's worth it, but it requires like a massive amount of work to really make a great meal night after night. And Japan just had that period of time. Now it's all chains. Japan's still great, but the chain stores are just taken over because the price of labor, the quality of Japanese workers, the thinking, the money, everything's changed, right? But when I got there, like I had like a fucking Michelin 5-star once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week. I just had food that I had no appreciation of. Now I do. I see back what I had was fucking amazing. Like, I'm talking like, if you're not like rich, like if you're not in the billionaire class and you're a real foodie, you probably have no idea what I'm talking about. The lusciousness of the food, the subtlety, the freshness. I mean, you can't even make the food that I'm talking about in America. The ingredients don't exist. And you say, oh, we have this fabulous. You don't, because you don't have the infrastructure. Japan, when you went to a sushi restaurant, 5 times a day they got fresh fish from the ocean, because the ocean wasn't fished out by China yet. There was fresh fish, and they made you sashimi. The fish was absolutely just from the ocean. And then 5 times a day they threw the fish away. All that beautiful fish, and they got a fresh batch. That's what the bubble was. They had so much money. Every single dish, whenever you had like a fried dish, like I can't think of the name right now. Not teppanyaki, but like we had a deep fried dish. They used
fish and chips.
No, yeah, no. You had this like they used this very expensive oil, right? It was very, very high quality oil. And they had a huge vat of it. So let's say, I don't know how many gallons in there. Let's say 10 gallons or 8 gallons just to make one meal. And then they would throw it away. I mean, this was the best oil in the world. And it only cooked one dish. And I was like, they told me that when I got, and then this is in the bubble. And now this was a very expensive meal. Like we're talking $4,000 to $5,000 for lunch. Even in the bubble. But still, you can't get that anywhere anymore. Like they would throw the oil, that they were so, the Japanese were such perfectionists. They had the most delicious oil. Everybody was on board in Japan. Nobody cheated. Nobody fucking cheated. Anywhere along the line of the supply chain of oil, that oil was the best. And it was very expensive. And then every chef, it sounds unbelievable to Americans, gave a shit. And they would throw it away. They would use it for one meal, and they would throw it away. And when you had a fried dish with the best oil in a very expensive restaurant from the most conscientious possible supply chain, that fried, the lightness of the oil, the lightness of the fry, it didn't even taste anything like I've ever tasted since. It didn't taste like fried. It almost tasted like steamed. It was so delicious. And the Japanese never overcook stuff. So it was always cooked as quickly as like drop it in. As soon as it's done, it's out. Like Americans, if you eat American food, sadly, there's something wrong with the American brain when it comes to food. They just don't understand. I always joke that Americans think that the vegetables are not dead yet. You have to kill them. You have to overcook them until they're possibly not going to kill you. You know, the vegetables need to be killed. You know, they're not dead yet. You got to just beat them into submission somehow. You know, the peas are just it's sad. But Japan is the exact opposite. The fish is literally falling apart. Like the different layers inside of the fish, you know, there's that fascia between different layers. It's just sliding off each other. Just when you pick it up with a fork. It was just, I mean, I understand that this is not good for the environment to have food this good. But I got to tell you, like, there's something about beauty. Just to have seen, to have tasted, experienced, probably the finest food man ever made. You know, I remember, and I'm not exaggerating. Like, I remember when, what is his name? The big food guy.
Gordon Ramsay?
No. Before, the not the chef, the taster guy. There was the one guy who killed himself, not him, the other guy who's still alive. Anyway, he went to Japan.
Guy Fieri?
No.
Okay.
He went to Japan, let's say 30 years ago, which I'm talking way before that. But he went to Japan and he was like, oh my gosh, there's a 5-star Michelin restaurant on every corner here. And he started putting Japanese restaurants into the Michelin Guide like crazy, right? And I was there before him. And I was eating this food. And yet I'm part of modern culture. So I'm reading that there's this delicious food in London and New York. And I was thinking, I just don't know if it can be any better than this. Like, this is absolutely wonderful. And then foodie after foodie friend would go to Japan and they would be like blown away. But because it was Asia, I guess it's some kind of it was like a bias because you got to go back in time 40 years. Times change, right? Nobody expected Japan to have the finest food. Like it wasn't even anything that crossed anybody's mind. Like the finest chefs were in London, right? You know, there's these things that are it's kind of like nobody expected Portugal to have killer waves or France, you know, or Ireland. But now with drone technology and with modern shipping and stuff, they're finding like killer waves everywhere now. When I was growing up, there was only a few places where there was killer waves. Everybody thought it was Hawaii number 1, Australia, California. Let me think. We're talking like 75 here. What else was known? Oh, not much else. And then the movie Endless Summer came out. And then Endless Summer, they went to Africa, right? And that was what blew surfing open. Because everybody dreamed of an unknown wave that you had never seen. In some country you would never guess. You know what I mean? Like the most primitive country where they're still eating people or something, right? Like that, and then there's this world-class grinding, insane waves over unknown razor reefs and sharks, and it just kicked off a cultural revolution in surfing where everybody just traveled. Surfers just became travelers. Everywhere you go, there were surfers, inspired by the movie Endless Summer, and I was inspired. I was one of those people. That's why I went to India to surf. I might have surfed the first time in places. I had my board. No one had ever seen one. I went to India. I had it tied on my motorcycle. You know, I just had a rope, tied with a rope straight up and down vertical, facing sideways, the fins sticking out sideways. And it was amazing. I just tied it to the this little case I had in the back. And it was the weirdest thing, but it worked. It was hard to get off and on, trust me on that. I surfed at Killer Beach in places where, I almost drowned. The only time I ever came close to drowning was in Killer Beach in Mahabalipuram. And that and I thought it was me. I thought it was, my spirit that brought me traveling the world carrying a surfboard. But actually, it wasn't me. It was actually, now looking back, it was, giving credit, right? Endless Summer. It was that movie, Endless Summer. And actually, Severson, the guy who filmed it, I went to school with his son, Eric Severson. And I didn't even know his dad was famous. I had no idea. But they filmed Endless Summer, right? Or produced or whatever. If you watch the movie, you'll see what his credit was. But Severson. But that movie greatly inspired me and my brother. We started going to Mexico. And we did many crazy surfing trips, almost dying in Mexico. Crazy. Mexico was crazy back then, and we were crazy. It was insane, man. It was insane. I should do a Mexico. If we end up doing a Mexico summit in April, which I don't know if we're going to, Edgar, I don't know if we're going to be able to pull it off. I want to. Maybe we can. Maybe we won't do a U.S. summit. If nobody comes up with a fucking house, we might do Guadalajara in April. Or, early April. We got to find either a house, California, Vegas, Texas. If we don't find a house, then it's going to have to be Guadalajara, because Edgar is fucking awesome. He's in Guadalajara, and he's got it all set up. So come up with a house, or it's going to be Guadalajara, and then it's going to be Phnom Penh in May. But, it's interesting. I'm thinking about how things influence things and how we're a product of our friends and what we listen to and what we study. And then it greatly influences our lives. When you're older, you'll be able to see the influence that people had on you. And it will blow you away, because you'll be like, at first, you want to deny it because you want to, and that's good. You want to have self-esteem and say, I did it myself. I did it. That's good. It's good. There's a good aspect of believing that you did it, But later, when you get more confident, you'll be able to give credit and say, I did do it. I chose to listen to that guy. I chose to listen to that. I chose to let that idea marinate in my brain, right? I let it infiltrate my life, that concept, which led to this and this and this. And that concept came from, here, right? But, back to this episode really has become much deeper than I started with Minose. I might not even do any Minose. I will just say this is there are ruined lives of brilliant minds with exceedingly dull women. And when I say dull, I don't mean boring. I mean like a dull knife. Lacking in expression. Lacking in creativity. Where your inner soul gives up. You're listening to stupidity for so long, and it's stupid that you finally just give up. And your escape route could be many ways. It could be just being by yourself. It could be drinking. It could be depression. But if you surround yourself with a Minose level person, you will live a different life than you would have lived. You will miss swaths of opportunities to laugh and travel and have friends. One of the characteristics I notice with Minose type chicks, women in general can be very controlling, especially in a family. But I gotta say, when we're talking about the Minose level chicks, it is so sad. Okay? So, Minose chicks don't understand basic things about life. Now you think, oh, Ronan's exaggerating. Let me give you an example. So there was a maid. I had a maid company in China. One of our side businesses, which we used to kind of get other business, right? So we had 700 maids we would send out to people's houses, and then that led to my other businesses, right? The opportunity from all those expat families that we met and wealthy Chinese families. The maid gave us information, which led us to doing a lot of other business. And so it was an important part of our business. And we had maids all over our house all the time. I had free maids to do everything as much as I wanted because they all wanted to make the boss happy. I could have fucked all the maids. I mean, it was like right there for me. I did not. But I in the end, I realized I kicked our maids out and I simplified our lives because I didn't want the stupidity of the Minose to be my life, you know. And let me give you an example. So one of the maids was very sad one day and, asked what's up. And so what happened was she was like sad and confused. She was a nice person. And so what had happened is her baby had suffocated that night and the night before. And the reason was, she didn't know the reason, but we kind of checked into it. She had given the baby a plastic blanket. So it was an infant. And so she found the baby was warmer because she was poor if the baby had a plastic blanket on the bottom and then a bunch of blankets on top. And then the heat would, the baby was warm in the winter with the heater. She couldn't afford the heater, right? So a lot of times when they can't afford stuff, it wasn't that we weren't giving them money, is they often had gambling drunk husbands. So it was like a lot of craziness with these women. You could give them money with just Minose. It's sometimes you can try to help. It's just like, evaporates. Like the sadness never ends when you deal with Minose. And so she didn't understand the baby needs to breathe and the plastic could block. I honestly talked to her in Chinese. I don't think she understood that we need to breathe. I don't think. She didn't go to school. I don't think she had ever thought about breathing, that it was important. Yeah, she had never. And think about it. If you were uneducated, maybe you wouldn't have thought about it. She had never thought about breathing, like never really considered what that was. It was just something you do or something, Yeah. And so she didn't understand that, an infant could stop breathing and die. And she learned the hard way. And this is why I don't like DEI. Whenever you put somebody who's not the best, they're going to not understand some basic concepts that are very, very important. And it struck me, the Minose uneducated people, I really realized, I never, except for me, basically, every expat, probably you would be too if you moved here, would want a maid, okay? Because you think, well, fuck, they can do all the work for me, $120 a month. They're often hot. You can fuck them. You can do whatever you want if they like you. You know what I mean? Like some of them are like smoking hot, like Dave's white maid, just 20 years old, absolute fucking killer body, open to it, right? Open to it, very. But I've seen what a total lack of education does. Like, you can't protect from Minose. Like, the level of lack of knowledge of basic things, you can never predict it. Let me give you some more examples. So, one guy knew, he ran a country club out by the American school in Shanghai. And I forgot the name of the neighborhood. I stayed there for like 6 months. I can't remember what it was called. Anyway, there's a nice houses and stuff. And so I was asking him about his, how he managed to manage a very nice, well-run golf resort. Because it wasn't easy. Because back then you were dealing with a lot of Minose around. countryside people would come to Beijing and Shanghai to work, right? And Shenzhen. And a lot of them were starting from absolute scratch, right? So I asked him, like, what were his challenges? And he said, well, he thought about it, and he said, well, one of the most interesting things was I had this maid or a cleaner who would clean the bathrooms, and she never would pick up garbage on the ground. She just didn't pick up garbage, right? And so he's like, she wasn't stupid, and she was like, as far as being a person, right, normal person, right, seemed normal, right? And he had many times he had got down on her for it, and she had been sorry and everything, and then she still wouldn't pick up the garbage. And finally he realized, and this is what happens, you can't realize what uneducated people are thinking. It's almost impossible to guess. He realized that she couldn't see the garbage because it was so much cleaner. The bathroom was so much cleaner than her house and where she was raised that she could not physically see the garbage. And he had this awakening, which was amazing. He realized that how the bathroom to her, looked like a surgery room, like perfectly clean. Like she couldn't understand why you'd want that room, with all the shit and piss, to be cleaner than the most sacred room in her house. Like, why would you, what would be the point of that? Not necessary, right? It's unbalanced. She couldn't see the garbage. It was just it was always garbage everywhere that she looked, right? And so finally he got on the ground with her and they looked at a piece of garbage, and he said, he picked up the garbage and he put it away, and he said to her, he had a translator, right? So do you think the floor is cleaner, now that garbage is not there? And then she was like, you saw the light come on her eyes. She's like, oh, yeah. Now that it's not there, the floor is cleaner. So then he picked up another piece and he said, does it look cleaner now than it was when the garbage was, he put it back, and then she was like, she got it, right? She's like, oh, those things on the ground don't need to be there. It looks better without it. And then she was a very good maid. She cleaned everything, and she wasn't passive aggressive. She really, you can't imagine where people are coming from when they're not educated. It's like you just not knowing that you need to breathe. Even after your kid dies, not understanding that, and not seeing that garbage doesn't need to be there. When you grow up around garbage, you think, garbage is always there. It's always garbage everywhere, right? There's a lot less garbage here than there is over in my house, right? So this is pretty fucking good, right? I'm doing a good job, right? And let's see. So I'll give you one other example. And this one should strike fear in your hearts, right? So there was a maid, and it wasn't our maid, thank God. But we heard about it through the grapevine. It was in Beijing. I was in Shanghai. But the maid wasn't happy about some very mundane thing. I think she wanted to go on holiday, and she couldn't leave a day early or something. So she was unhappy. And she was raised in an area of China where kids are kidnapped all the time and sold. Those beggars on the street, the ones I, try to save, those ones, the episode I talked about before. So those kids, there's a system in China that's thousands of years old. And what happens is if you have a kid, you take it to a certain street corner. There's a certain street corner. It's street corner number 1. And it's where you take a kid that's just been kidnapped to sell. This is a evil, thousands of year old system. And then you sell it to somebody. And then the system is so weird. Then that person takes the kid and drives to another city in another area and sells the kid. And that one takes, these are all decided. There's all certain street corner number 1. Everybody knows that's the first place. There's street corner number 2, number 3, number 4. So what happens is when you do that, it's a protection, self-protective system for the selling of kids system, right? Because once the kids got to the 5th place, city, if the kid's too young to know where he lives and his parents and stuff, which is what they would kidnap, the kid wouldn't know who his parents were. He didn't know what city he lived in. He didn't know what a map was yet. So the kid was totally hopeless. But even if you grab the person who had the kid and tortured them or whatever, they couldn't tell you where the kid's from. Because the system is, you never talked. The first person would come, and it was usually women, because they could kidnap easier, the first step. And they would take the kid and then give it to the first person, and the first person would give it, say, they wouldn't talk. Nobody knew anybody's name. It was just a silent thing. It was like a drug dealer on the street corner. You're handing him money, he hands you an envelope, you leave. That's what it was. So nobody had talked to anybody. So once that kid was sold to the final person, and they made about, I think, of $5,000 or $6,000 the final sale, right? Maybe for organ harvesting or whatever the fuck, slavery, begging, who knows what evil things people get up to, right? So, I mean, the level of evilness of the system is beyond fucking. Once I figured the thing out, I was just like, what in the fuck? I got to stop this. That's when I started, helping, and I talked about it in the previous episode. But it was something you couldn't set back in time. So anyway, this maid was unhappy with the payment, so she took the kid, and it was a very wealthy family. It was a Beijing wealthy Chinese family. So she was disgruntled, and so she took their kid and sold it. And then the kid went through the system. And the parents, not only did they lose their kid, but they know that the kid has, basically, the weight and the severity of this one-time thing is beyond anything you can imagine. Because when a child passes away, let's say like they get like childhood cancer or like whatever, there's something in humans that can accept that, because we've evolved to accept that. We haven't evolved to having our kids, like a wealthy Beijing family, to suddenly have their kid in like slavery and literally the winds of death, like fate, like literally thrown to the wolves forever. And no possibility that they'll ever come back. Like no chance the kid can be saved. No chance the kid's going to come back to the life he would have had. No chance you're ever going to meet him. No chance the kid's going to be happy. No chance it's going to be good. Like no chance. There's no chance. Anybody who buys this kid, there's no chance. This is not an orphanage. This is straight into evil. It's just wit type of evil. And will they survive it? And how damaged will they be? There's no silver lining on this one. Never escape. Nope. And so the maid had just sold that kid because she was unhappy about not getting a day off, right? And the police, China had evolved, way past that, and they had the maid, and they're like, why did you do that? Like, basically. And she's like, well, I didn't get paid. I wanted that day off. I wanted this. And they're like, do you realize, and the police kind of realized, the lady literally didn't understand what she did. Like, she wasn't like a psychopath. Like, this was Minose. She really didn't understand. Like, she hadn't been taught to really think of consequences and how consequences kind of happen, right? Like, what happens? She really couldn't see the future. She didn't have that kind of experience of thinking. She lived in the moment. I know she had some understanding, but the cops kind of finally realized, like, what was so hopeless about it is that she didn't even really understand what she did. And that's Minose. That's why you don't want a person who is coming from that level. Because I think Westerners, we're no dummies. We know that there's evil people. We know that there's different personality disorders, and there's all that, and we know people can do terrible things. But what we're really not really ready for is the clash of really modernity and like the far past, and also too what somebody from the far past can do in the modern age. Like, this stuff wouldn't have been possible without the inventions of the modern age, right? Cars, and they couldn't go far enough to give the kid so that these 5 cities could be far enough apart. Like, you're not going to ride a horse for like 10 days over mountains. You know what I mean? It wasn't worth it, right? It's an old system, but with today's technology, it's become an evil, unstoppable thing, right? And by the way, that's why I don't recommend, adopting a kid in China, because this system still exists and hasn't been fully eradicated. And the people that do this, they're always looking for side jobs. They're always looking for work. They're people who kind of sold their soul to the devil anyway. So any opportunity, they're basically in the business of kids. And naturally, there's going to be some people with a little bit more morals than others and a little bit less, right? And then human evil comes in, because some of them have been doing it so long, they just sold themselves totally to the devil, basically, for lack of a better, So that's why I never recommend adopting in China, because you don't know. Never believe the story you hear about a kid coming from China. Now, I know people adopted kids in China. They're not going to want to hear this episode. They're going to think the story the orphanage told me is the way it is. But I'm going to tell you, it was not. It was not. There was another story. Probably loving parents that wanted the kid. The most likely story of those adopted kids, the most likely, is that the one-child policy people ripped the kids out of the parents' arms and then sold it and got about $6,000. That's the most likely. I would say like a very, very high percentage. Parents didn't give up kids. Chinese people loved their kids. These kids, anytime, nowadays the whole system's kind of dried up because people really value kids, and the police are coming down hard. But like when I got there, this was like Minose, man. People didn't even think about it. They just it was just like, yeah, that sucks. But my life sucks too, right? That was kind of the attitude. Like, people that are in very, very desperate situations, they can only take so much, basically. And they're just kind of like, yeah, basically, yeah. It's like, yeah, you got your burden, you know what I mean? Like, I got mine, It's like there was a lot of sadness from, really it all came from communism. For you guys that are not putting the pieces together. It all came from after Mao took over. Chinese culture was not like this before. You had these systems, but they were not like, they were not like what happened when all values fell apart through the Cultural Revolution, the Great Leap Forward, the mass starvation, and the loss of humanity. It all conspired to make that I'm talking about. People were utterly gutted of a soul. And that's the only way they could do that. So there's consequences, right? A lot of people, socialists in the U.S., they don't understand. Like, they really have not seen a lot of the world. And they really don't know where things lead. And I can't really blame them for that. I've learned from being there. I learned from learning Chinese, talking to my maid. My maid, my maid the last maid I had before I fired all maids, she was a very nice person. She came back sad from vacation. We had sent her, paid for her to go home on Chinese New Year's. And there was a rumor. Oh, no, there wasn't a rumor. No, she had to go home. And anybody who's been in China says this story is bullshit. You don't know enough about China. There's so many different Chinas inside China. Every area has certain things that happen, and they don't happen necessarily in all of China. The longer you know China, the more you'll realize, oh, fuck, anything can happen, right? Like, literally, you realize it's crazy what can happen. But in her hometown, the one-child policy people had real power. And she had to go, and she already had a kid. So every time she came home, she had to check for if she was pregnant. Once a year, she had to go check. I think this was pretty much China-wide, but the brutality of her area was a little bit tougher than other areas. I don't want to tell you some of the stories, but I'll just say the basic what happened to her. So she went home, and she was pregnant, and she had to go home. They forced her to go home. So she went home. She was pregnant, screaming. They took her to the abortion clinic, ripped the baby out, and then Happy New Year's. Sent her back to her family. And that was what happened, That also, one-child policy was another policy that would never happen without the Communist Party. There's no way. There's no way that would have been voted in or anything, That was Mao. That was total Mao all the way. And there could be, I could do many episodes on the evil that came out of this one-child policy, but it's beyond. There's a balance, okay? You want to know reality, but you just want to be careful about how far you want to go down. When you start seeing true evil, like, you can only take so much emotionally. I know you think you can take everything, but you haven't seen everything. The more you see, you realize, okay, I want to know. Here's my balance. I want to know evil. Okay, I just want to know. I don't want to be clueless. But at the same time, I need to take a break from evil because I want to live a great life and laugh my ass off. But I want to be aware. Anytime something happens around me and I see smell a hint of evil, right? Then I'm awake and I'm alert for whatever's happening. I'm not, what is it called? Constant vigilance. So there's a problem you can have where your blood sugar is high or your blood pressure, because you're just constantly, like, if you've been traumatized too much, you think you're being attacked at all times. You have to learn when to fight and peace, right? So I think that's the balance. So we're going to go here at the end of the episode into peace, because learning about evil, learning about reality will make you a wise man. But a wise man knows he's limited, right? That's why I always say every guy can get got. So he might get you, but you're going to have to pull away. You need friends. You cannot be blue pill with Minose. You just can't do it. You just can't. I'm telling you, that is one thing that is not acceptable. You can't let yourself and you can't let your kids be the victim of this, because the kids are the true victim. For you, it's just the end of a good life. It's just a shit life from now on. That's fine. But for the kids, it's the whole thing. It's a woman who believes in potions and, witchcraft
Souls potion,
without calling it witchcraft. That, like, basically, like, that is what she believes. She believes in these type of things that we call witchcraft, right? And has no understanding of a lot of basic things like gravity and oxygen and, like not even an appreciation for people. Like when I meet somebody who's truly educated, and especially if they're like kind of a genius, I'll just use Sean because you guys know Sean. Sean's a great example of just a very rare individual, right? And not only is he in the right place at the right time, but he's the right guy, right? Had the basic skills, right? And discipline. And turned himself into something that I think is quite unique and valuable. And Minose will never have any appreciation for that. Like Minose is kind of like, yeah, that's your opinion. You know what I mean? Like Minose knows the way things are. And Minose will, because Minose, in this case, we're men, right? So we're talking about women. So we're talking about any kind of long-term relationship, which often leads to kids and family, whether it's called marriage or not, whether you think you're going to outsmart it, you're going to end up in essentially what is a marriage. And women take over in that situation. The problem is Minose's taken over. Minose's taken over. And that means your kids are never going to have a chance. There's a lack of vision that is so profound and appreciation, understanding of life that the kids are not getting the nutrients, both, minerals and vitamins and all that, and fiber, but they're not getting the base. They're not getting the best that the modern world offers. They're not getting anything that has been learned in the last, basically the era of science. They're in a brutal, simple world where they're being left unattended and at the whim of evil people in that area. They're unprotected. Not only are they not guided, they're utterly unprotected from other people like that. And what happens is tragedy, right? So you gotta, if you're a guy who's got kids with Minose, you gotta make hard decisions. Hard decisions. I'm not gonna mention those decisions, but too much. But ultimately, it would be nice if you could save the kids somehow. Get them to a place where they have a chance. Where they have a chance to grow and blossom and succeed. And the sad thing is a lot of these kids, the Minose kids, are pretty good looking too. So which makes them much more vulnerable to anything physical, because the women that the guys choose tend to be very attractive. So you got some damn good looking kids out there who have real opportunities in this world. And the basic DNA they have is fine. Looks come from DNA, right? The good DNA, like there's good basic Play-Doh. They just need to be in a situation where they're safe, they're loved, they're protected, and they're also given the key to the door that is the modern world of things we appreciate, things we understand, and all the massive options we have now. Because the options we had before were very simple. My parents were raised very, very simple place. And my mom often apologizes that they didn't understand, like there was other careers that we could have done, or they couldn't. My parents were completely baffled. Well, that's partly why I understand Minose, is because some of my relatives from Finland, way back relatives, they knew math and they could write and they could spell. But man, there was some big holes in their knowledge, I'll tell you that. And I knew them, It was when I was very young. We're talking 50 years ago, more than 50 years ago. But they were still alive, and I saw, Minose also in my family, And I just think that as a thinking, caring human being, you want, cross the river feeling stones, man. It's the best way to put it. Grab the best things you can. Just hop, skip, and jump over those stones while they're disappearing to the next fucking happy island, right? That requires a lot of skills, a lot of energy, a lot of intelligence, and you got it, right? So take this as you wish. Take this warning. Thank you for listening.